that's actually helpful information because it tells me, oh, I don't probably have a genetic component to this issue, and therefore it's probably going to be easier to resolve than if I had.
Welcome to the Rejuvenate Podcast. I'm your host, Chrissy Hawks, and I'm here with my co-host, Elwin Robinson. And this is part 2 of our Genetic Insights episode, where we're delving deeper into what the Genetic Insights wellness reports are and any questions you may have about them, and essentially breaking it down. What are your genes and how do they impact your health? So if you haven't seen that episode, please do make sure that you go back and you watch part 1, and we will carry on now with part 2. So Elwin, my first question is to start off this segment is, I know how we finished on the last episode was really looking at the impacts and the things that the wellness reports, what the big discovery was for you. So can you go deeper into the other clients that you helped or other examples of where you've seen these reports really help someone get further along their healing journey?
Yeah, absolutely. It's funny, I was just laughing to myself because I did a podcast interview a few days ago with someone and they asked me to share, what I'd helped other clients with. And I basically said, no, I'm not going to do it because I didn't want to give away anything confidential, right? Often I'm working with people who are known. But in this case, I've actually prepared. So there's a few people who I've spoken to. I've asked, are you sure? Obviously I'm not going to say their names or anything, but even, when you start talking about people, it's maybe identifiable to some other people who are listening. But anyway, so if I sound a little bit general and a bit vague, it's because confidentiality is, A1, most important to me. But anyway, yeah, so a few examples, absolutely. Well, one big one that I am allowed to share definitely is with one of my business partners who I know well, so I feel confident that his permission is not in any way coerced, but completely genuine. And so, yeah, there was a situation with him where it's funny, like with several people I've collaborated with, again, all are given permission. There's been a situation where early on in their collaboration, they had some kind of significant health challenge. And in fact, the collaboration never even would have gone ahead if I weren't able to help them. And so I guess this hasn't happened with you and I, Chrissy, thank God, but it has happened with others. So there was this, in this case, this is someone who was extremely hardworking, entrepreneurial, was, always working flat out. And so they were kind of typically, a little bit tired, a little bit distracted, but they were getting to a position where they were exhausted. And then one day they kind of just opened up and shared that they couldn't even drag themselves out of bed in the morning. Like literally it took several hours to get out of bed, that, every moment was like a living hell, that they thought they might be depressed. And I heard them talk about this. And so this was someone who has, done therapy for years, someone who, had a family, a successful career, all the rest of it. Now, I realize people can be depressed no matter what, but it just didn't really strike me as the thing that was going on with that person in that case, based on my intuition. But of course, I'm not one of these people who is going to act like their intuition is foolproof or, could never be wrong. But it was just a feeling I had. So I invited them to do the genetic reports. And what I had in the back of my mind is, I think there's something going on with their thyroid and adrenals. And this is something, as you know, Chrissy, that's a big preoccupation with me. We've filmed an episode about it. I'm not sure if it'll be out yet by the time this one comes out. But, we also have filmed an episode, again, I'm not sure if it'll be out yet, about metabolism, which relates strongly to the thyroid. So it's something that, I'm very passionate about. And I think it's way underdiagnosed if you're talking about optimization. It's true, not most people don't have a severe enough disease that it's a medical criteria, so I'm not arguing with that, but there's a lot of people with suboptimal thyroid. So anyway, I suspected this person was one of them. But this person was so busy and, completely overwhelmed and barely able to function as it is, to tell them that they had to go and find a doctor who specialized in this, get all of these tests done. Despite their level of, financial success, they still didn't feel like, they could throw money around. So it was like a cost thing as well. And so I said, yeah, that makes sense. Let's just do the genetic reports and see what comes up. Maybe depression will come up, maybe something else. But what struck me is it just seemed like they were describing a situation of low energy rather than depression, it wasn't so much like it seems pointless to get out of bed. It was more like, I really, really want to get out of bed. I just can't. And I know sometimes depression can be that, but just the way that they described it kind of made me think that. So we did genetic testing, and the headline was that the thing that they had the highest risk score with. So not every one of our health reports, and again, you got to watch part 1 if you haven't, because we're jumping right in the middle here, but not every one of our health reports has like a percentage risk score. Some of them just have like high or low or normal or elevated or something like that. But as when we can, we do a percentage score. And this particular report was underactive thyroid gland, and there was a percentage score. And this person had the top 1 percentile risk for an underactive thyroid gland, and they were only in their 30s, younger than us. So this is often something that develops later. As you get older, it's more and more likely to hit you.
Can you make a quick distinction in that 1 percentile versus the 100th, and what that, so that we can really follow here and what that means? Yeah,
definitely. So what that means is, if there's 100 people in the room, statistically, that person will be the most likely to have an underactive thyroid. It means if there's 1,000 people in the room, that person, along with 9 other people, will be the most likely to have an underactive thyroid. So it's that. We actually, in the report, we say 99th percentile. So maybe that makes more sense to Americans. I don't know. For me, I like to think of it as the top 1%. So whatever works for you. But yeah, like the highest risk category that we actually have, we don't get more high than that. And so what I found is, obviously, the reports are not always accurate because, as we talked about in the last episode, you're going to get the same report pretty much. I mean, there's a bit of variation, but broadly, you're going to get the same report at any stage of your life, right? And so, obviously, when you're, 10, you're very unlikely to have an underactive thyroid yet. And then, maybe by the time you're in your 40s or 50s, it's much more likely to have shown up if it's going to. But this person was more early 30s, so it's fairly unlikely. Which is why, even though it sounded like it to me, I was not, trusting my intuition. But then when I saw that genetic outcome, and then sure enough, that person spoke to their parents and went, oh yeah, actually, it turns out my mother has probably had it for a long time, undiagnosed, but she has it worse than me. In fact, all of these symptoms. So I'm going to get her sorted out. But anyway, I'm skipping ahead a little bit. So because they saw that, this is the crucial distinction, because they saw that, I said, look, I can't sort this out for you. This is a medical issue, but here's what you need to do. You need to find a medical doctor, and you need to make sure it's someone who specializes in optimizing hormones and optimizing the thyroid specifically, not just a general practitioner, because they'd already seen a general practitioner, and the general practitioner said they're fine. It turned out that not only did they have an underactive thyroid, they also had Hashimoto's, which is an autoimmune disease where your immune system attacks your own thyroid gland. So this was actually a more serious issue even than than I'd originally anticipated. It's not just that it was struggling to produce enough thyroid hormone to produce enough energy. It was that it was being attacked by the immune system, and if left untreated, it would have got really bad eventually. So that was a great example. Obviously, there's others, but I'm allowed to share that one because it's someone who I'm so close to, and more importantly, because it's someone I'm so close to, this had a huge impact on my life personally, right? That this person is well again and able to function rather than the direction that they were going in. Thyroid wasn't the only thing. There was a little bit of other hormone optimization, but it was the main thing. And they were also given NDT, which is something I talked about in a previous episode. In the inflammation episodes, the chronic pain inflammation episodes, I talk about that as a thing that is very effective at calming down inflammation by stopping the immune system attacking itself. So that's actually how I found out about NDT, was by looking into how to help with autoimmunity for Hashimoto's. And it was one of the things that came up as very effective according to a lot of people. And sure enough, his doctor prescribed it to him. And, before long, got better. Very simple. I just gave the game away a little bit there. I said him. And, this is the other thing. Underactive thyroid is more common with women than men, 3-1 more common. So again, this is where, even though I had intuition for it, I was like, it doesn't, and then they weren't particularly overweight, which is one of the classic signs of it. And so, intuition said yes, but a lot of logic said no, if that makes sense. The age, the gender, everything.
Completely. Just to quickly go back, you said NDT. Could you just quickly name what that is for everybody in case they haven't watched that episode yet?
Yeah, actually, I said the wrong thing. So NDT stands for natural desiccated thyroid, which is what he ended up taking, which generally is what people who have underactive thyroids are going to want to take in most cases, although, of course, check that with your qualified optimization doctor. I actually meant to say LDN, which stands for low dose naltrexone.
That's what I thought. So I wanted to get some clarification.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, of course. Perfect.
They're both relevant. He was on both, but yeah, I got it wrong. Thank you. So that was great. Another example. So someone else who presented as much more typically underactive thyroid. This was a woman. She had more of a weight challenge. She had more of the kind of classic signs. I guess that's a couple of them. She was cold, like noticeably cold, felt cold, stuff like that. So I thought, okay, seems like a reasonable chance with her as well. And so we did the genetic tests again. Again, not an easy thing to get this person to do a bunch of medical tests. And even though I always recommend it. And actually, the genetic test showed up as not any tendency for a thyroid issue. Now, of course, that doesn't necessarily mean you don't have one. I want to make this distinction here, actually. Is it possible that you get a report that tells you have a high risk or a very high risk and you don't have the issue? Of course. That's why we give a percentage score, or it's a risk. It's not a certainty. We do not diagnose anything. And I do not say that, as a disclaimer or to protect myself. But again, just logically, as I said earlier, think about it. You get the same report pretty much at any stage of life. So, of course, we can't tell you when, has it manifested yet? Will it ever manifest? That's something you got to check. We can only tell you risk based on the very advanced calculations that we can make that I talked about in part 1. And so for her, it turned out that she actually had a genetic tendency to need more iron. And I think there was another mineral, it might have been copper or something, I can't quite remember, but iron was the most important one. And so again, would I tell a person to start taking more iron just because it says it in a genetic test? You might think yes, right? It's not a drug, it's fine, it's a supplement. But no, because actually having too much iron is as bad for you as too little. Now, to be fair, to be honest, with women, because they menstruate, and she was of that age, they rarely have like such high iron that it's a medical issue, that hemochromatosis, I can't remember how to say it, but the thing where you have a toxic level of iron that usually happens with men. But still, even not a toxic level of iron, but just a above optimal level of iron is not good. So I do not generally recommend that people take iron unless they've tested to see if they need iron. The good news is that iron tests are very cheap, very easily available, and you can do them at home with a finger prick test. So it's not a challenging thing to do for most people. And so she did that test. Sure enough, very low on iron. Now, so first of all, she didn't have massive signs of anemia though, like a little bit, but not significant. And so this is an example of like she presented as being underactive thyroid to some degree, but one of the things that your body needs to transport thyroid hormone T3 from the bloodstream into the cells is a sufficient amount of iron. And when there's not enough iron, not enough gets into the cells. Plus, you could have a perfect level in the blood. I don't think she did, but it wasn't that bad. But you can have a perfect amount in the blood, and yet you can have a problem because not enough of it is getting into the cell. It's staying in the blood and not getting where it actually has an action, where you want it to be, where it needs to go. So this is a great example of, a test that cost, I don't know, $30, something like that, or could cost $30. A supplement that costs, $15, something like that. And she's transformed, and she even was able to start losing weight as a result. And, it was a really big deal. So sometimes it isn't like that involved. You got to go to the doctor, you got to get all these tests. You got to be on prescription. Sometimes it's simple as that. It certainly can be. With a situation that looked quite similar, like both of them presented as underactive thyroid. I guess that's why I wanted to highlight them.
I think you make a really great distinction there in the sense that you have two individuals that are potentially, presenting very similar, but yet the course of action is completely different.
Absolutely. And in either case, if we just swapped what they did, each thing would have made the other person worse, right? So it is really, really crucial to get the right thing for what you need.
I also love too that you're like, no, this is what we received in the report. Now let's go test as well, just so that you also have that basis of underlying information so that you know that the next step that you're taking is the correct step in the right direction.
And I just want to clarify, I wouldn't recommend that of everything. Like I did that specifically for iron. If it's like an amino acid that you're low on, you could just look up, what foods have high levels of that amino acid, or you could just take the supplement because it's kind of hard to overdose on amino acids. That's fine. Ditto of any of the B vitamins or vitamins, right? If it says that you have an enhanced need, you could just start taking more of that probably in one form or another. But when it comes to certain minerals like iron, zinc, copper, molybdenum as well, when it comes to certain vitamins, basically the fat-soluble ones, A, D, E especially, you want to be really careful that you're not, or that you haven't already got too much before you add any more. So yeah, just want to make that distinction. A lot of the time, you can actually just buy a supplement and it will just help. But with some of them, you do want to be more careful.
Perfect. Do you have any more examples for us other than those two?
Yeah, so another one would be a digestive issue. So this is an interesting one. Again, I have their permission because this is someone I know well. And they had stomach issues for a long, long time, and specifically stomach ulcers. And yet when I looked at their genetic reports, they didn't have a genetic tendency towards it. So, I never quite finished that point. So you can absolutely have a very high risk for something and not have it ever, or not have it for a long time. But what I wanted to say is you can also have the opposite. You can have a situation where you don't have a high genetic risk for something at all. Maybe you've got a normal risk for it. Maybe you've even got a low risk for it, but you still have the issue. What does that mean? So the way I would interpret that is this. Of course, you can still have the issue, but it just means that you don't have a genetic tendency towards it. And so therefore, I would say that's a good thing because it means it's easier to resolve. Like, this is a big one with allergies and intolerances, for instance, which are not impossible, but difficult to deal with. I know a lot of people who have been doing health stuff for a long time, highly committed, eat well, exercise well, live well, all the rest of it. And they still have allergies or they still have intolerances. It's a difficult thing to deal with. Some people manage it, but some people don't. And I think that's the distinction. If the allergy or intolerance is down to genetic factors, I believe that's where sometimes you can reduce the symptoms significantly, but they will never go away completely because they're kind of pre-programmed in a bit. Like we talked in the last episode about eye color, right? Eye color can change occasionally, but generally it's just the way it is. It's pre-programmed in. And so it's the same with allergies and intolerances. And it's the same with some of these chronic health issues as well, like, acid reflux or sinus congestion or, things like that, that they can just be, as soon as you're not perfect, they'll start showing up. And they're not, going to ruin your life and they're not going to kill you, but they're there. So the distinction is if the genetic report comes back and says you do not have a genetic tendency for it, that doesn't disprove the system. That's actually helpful information because it tells me, I don't probably have a genetic component to this issue, and therefore it's probably going to be easier to resolve than if I had. So in this case with this person, that it didn't seem like that was the case because they've been struggling with stomach ulcers like at least 15 years, maybe 20, for a long time. Off and on, not constantly, but it was like a consistent thing that it kept showing up, and they had to eat very carefully and all the rest of it. And so, when I looked through their reports, again, no tendency for indigestion, maybe indigestion, but no tendency for stomach ulcers, no high risk of stomach ulcers, also no high risk for susceptibility to H. pylori, which is the bacteria that is a contributing factor. Like, a lot of people have H. pylori without stomach ulcers, so that's one of those things that, you can't say it's a cause, but you could say it's a contributing factor. And so, but what there was a tendency for a lot of food allergies and intolerances back to that point. And there was also, we talked in the last episode about how we can tell you, should you be having high carbohydrate or low? Should you be having high fat or low? Should you be having high protein or low? Should you have high saturated fat or low? Because for some people it's good, People who talk about paleo, carnivore, usually keto, right? Eats lots of saturated fat. And then, people who are more plant-based are like, no, it's terrible, avoid it like the plague. And they both have a mountain of evidence to support their perspective. I would say, although I guess each side would not agree with that about the other. But my perspective is it's just about finding what is right for you since, discovering this genetic basis to so much. So anyway, in this person's case, they said they used to be the healthiest when they used to eat like this high carb and high protein diet and eat small meals regularly. And they were eating just mainly chicken and rice, like this very simple diet. And then they kind of got into health stuff and they started to eat all kinds of other stuff. They started to eat, salads and fruits and like a healthy, balanced, varied diet by any normal definition. And then also more healthy fats, more avocado, more olive oil, more, plant fats mainly, maybe eggs as well and stuff like that. So yeah, not saturated fat, the other kind. And they just were feeling worse and worse, but they didn't join the dots because they're eating a healthy diet now. This is the diet that everyone says is healthy, especially, back then when they first started. I mean, as I say, there's a bit more of a paleo, keto kind of fad at the moment, but back then it was definitely more of like a vegan, plant-based fad was in the alternative scene. And so that's what they've been doing for a long time, and they just never felt right. And then, so we pulled their reports, and it turned out they had a tendency to allergies and intolerances to a lot of foods, including things that were found in plants, like oxalates was one example. Oxalate is these tiny little crystals that are in a lot of plant foods, especially high in some things like spinach and chocolate and tea. And it turned out they loved spinach and they loved chocolate, and they ate it like a lot. And I was like, oh, okay. And so I said, again, I didn't, because this person had money. Now, in the case of if someone's broke, I would say just try not having those for a while. Elimination diet. We talk about that on the allergies and intolerances episode. That's already out. We can check that one out. You can check that one out to hear what I would do if I was in that position. But in this case, they had money. So I said, test. Find out. It's not essential, but they could do it, and they wanted to do it. They needed to be convinced before they were going to change their diet from this so-called healthy diet that they'd been eating for such a long time. And they get it back, and basically most of the foods that they ate on a regular basis, they had this really, really high score for, that it was really bad for them. They were really intolerant to it. And also in a genetic test, the other thing that came up is that fat was really bad for them. And it's funny because they were like, I never really I just, always eating it. And they were like a big fat follower of Tony Robbins. And for years, Tony Robbins was talking about the, not keto, but like the high, like fat is the best fuel kind of thing, the best long lasting fuel. And so they were trying to eat this low fat, low carb diet for years and just always feeling bad with it. And so they switched to not eating any of the foods they're intolerant to, certainly including oxalate, and not eating much fat. And actually, but this is not a restrictive diet. This is really going back to the way that they ate naturally pretty much when they wanted to. Maybe reducing chocolate was a bit of a blow, but I mean, other than that, it was no big deal. And they just started to feel so much better, right? And you may say, well, okay, that's great, Elwin. What the hell is that to do with stomach ulcers? Well, again, we don't quite know what causes a stomach ulcer, right? But as I say, H. pylori is a factor. But again, if you ask doctors, they say, well, inflammation. Okay. well, and even stress used to be the thing that was blamed on stomach ulcers until they discovered H. pylori. And it's like, okay, well, what inflames the system? What stresses the system? Well, lots of things, right? As I've talked about in lots of the episodes and will continue to. But one of the things that really inflames the system is when you have a chronic immune reaction to foods that you're eating every meal, right? So that can be one of the things that completely undermines all your efforts to health. And it's so sad when this happens because literally, like, the person totally doesn't deserve it, right? It's not like they're smoking and drinking and, staying up all night partying, taking drugs and, or it's not like they're a couch potato sitting on the sofa eating a box of 12 donuts and a pizza. Like, they're exercising, they're eating the best diet, they're positive thinking and they're doing all of this stuff.
Yeah, they're technically doing everything right.
And then they end up in hospital, like, almost dying with a bleeding ulcer. It's terrible. And it's, and I relate to it, obviously, because something similar happened to me, which I talked about in a different episode, where I thought I was doing everything right and I ended up not in a life-threatening situation, but still really suffering. And so, yeah, like that's, and again, like if I'd just said to this person, or if they'd have gone to some other practitioner, a nutritionist or whatever, and just said, you should cut out these foods, would it have been helpful? Maybe, right? Depending on the amount of authority that person had in their eyes. But it's like, how long do you stick to it? And how much do you stick to it, right? Because if you stick to a, reducing foods you're intolerant to 80% diet, you won't be that much better. You've really got to cut them out completely for the inflammation to start to calm down and subside, and for the stress response to start to calm down and get back to normal.
And how long do you think that is to really cut those out completely? For what period of time?
It's a good question. It totally depends on the person. It depends on it depends on so many factors, because it's like, how long does it take to calm down the immune system and the nervous system once it's completely overloaded? I can't say how long it'll take, but what I can say, the process won't start if you're doing something which it thinks is poisoning you every meal. That makes sense, right? If your whole system, your immune system and your nervous system is on high alert because it thinks the food is like a foreign invader, whether that's true or not. Obviously, it's not true, but that's how the immune system's treating it. That's what an allergy or an intolerance is. It's when you have an immune reaction to something as if it's a foreign invader. As long as that's what's going on, you're not going to be able to calm down. So I can't say how long it will take from the moment you start to be able to calm down, but what I can say is you won't really start to be able to calm down until you stop flooding your body of what it thinks is a poison. Because, we talked about me before and how my body had actually flooded by a poison, right? Like lead in my case, and mycotoxins as well to some degree, although that was less. But actually, as bad as that was, if your immune system thinks most of the food you're eating are like a virus or a bacteria that's out to kill you, it's almost worse. It almost explains how I would end up really sick, but they would end up almost dead in hospital because their body thought they'd like eating lead all day. I mean, that's the equivalent. Like, it's really, really bad if that's what's going on. So yeah, I mean, I could go on, but it's another example of how it's really helpful to get that genetic information. I had another client who was really struggling to lose weight. That was their big thing. And in their case, they were following a ketogenic diet, and they were doing loads and loads of exercise, and they were exhausted, and from my mind, they were stressed, although they didn't think that they were. And they, felt that they were doing the right thing. They just didn't quite understand why it wasn't working. So we did their reports. It turns out they're someone who thrived on a high level of carbohydrates. They could handle carbohydrates quite well. And it wasn't that they did well on fat. Oh, yeah, it was that they didn't do very well on high protein. So they've been having this really high protein diet, which generally is a good thing. Like, for most people, if you want to lose weight, having more protein is good, because protein is the thing that your body really needs. It's satiating for that reason, far more than carbohydrate or fat. And yet we all have this different capacity to actually deal with everything, whether it's toxins, whether it's allergens, whether it's food, different types of micronutrients, macronutrients, all the rest of it. They did not have a very good capacity to deal with protein. And so for them, weirdly, getting it from really high protein to just a medium level of protein, plus getting the carbohydrates up, then allowed their system to actually be able to calm down. They still also needed some thyroid support. But that didn't come up in the genetic test. That came up in blood tests, which I managed to persuade them to get. And then, the weight just fell off, because if you find the right fuel for you, and your metabolism is running correctly, it's almost impossible to gain weight. It's not that difficult to build muscle, especially if you're a man. And you have high testosterone, but for women especially, and this was women, it's really, really hard to gain weight if your metabolism is high and you're getting the right fuel for you, even if it's not super healthy. This is the crazy thing. Like, I can't handle simple sugars at all. Like, they completely mess me up. Even the ones that are supposed to be healthy, like, say, honey to some degree, according to most people. But this person, I think you have the same genetics, Chrissy, like, they could have simple sugars and be totally fine. Now, when I say totally fine, I mean, the keto people are probably screaming listening to this. I mean, totally fine compared to someone who can't handle it, right? I mean, very high amounts of, very refined sugar will eventually cause a problem to anyone. But it's how long does it take? How much can you handle before it becomes a problem? And how bad does the problem get? These are all the kind of variables, So for some people, they basically need to be on a ketogenic diet. Otherwise, they balloon in weight and develop diabetes. For other people, they're totally fine having a lot of carbs and even quite a lot of simple carbs. No problem, so long as they're otherwise living healthily and exercising and all the rest of it. Don't have high blood sugar, don't really have an issue. So again, genetics just makes such a massive difference with that.
Well said. I mean, as I've always known, and well, not always known, I shouldn't say that, but as I'm also finding out more and more and more, one, how complex this physical body is and all of its processes and everything, but also just the little intricacies that you find along the path that, it may look like it's one thing, but as we've been discovering, I've been discovering as you've been sharing these reports with me as well, it's like there's some of these little breadcrumbs along the way as well that can just help you when you're like, why isn't this working? And it can, advise you or show you, look over here, because this might be the thing. So no, that's what's really helpful. And so, Elwin, can you talk to our...
Let me just comment on that before you continue. Yeah, because this is my pet peeve. This is my biggest thing that I see with gurus. And as much as I made mistakes like earlier in my career with the things I recommended to people, one thing that I never did is if a person came to, and I used to do group coaching calls and one-on-one coaching calls, if a person came onto a call and they said to me, I did what you recommended and it didn't work, or I did what you recommended and it made it worse, I would never say, that's your fault. I would always be like interested to try and work out why and how can we help, And it's the fact that I continue to maintain that interest, I think that eventually led to me finding this. I mean, to be honest, it was because of my own problems I had as well. But I was always curious. I was always looking for new stuff, even before I had any issue myself that developed a few years ago, because of my clients who would show up and they'd say, I've done everything you recommended and it didn't work. And I took them at face value. I didn't question, are you lying? Are you, I just, okay, that sucks. Let me ask more questions. Let me try and understand and let me try and work out what's going on here as to why it didn't work. So many gurus and experts and teachers, they have like at least a little bit of a narcissistic tendency. And when they come across that, when they're challenged on that, what they do is they say, it's your fault. You weren't doing it correctly. So if they're a vegan, they're saying, you must have eaten some animal food, or, you're not having enough of the green vegetables, you're eating too much fruit, or like something about you not sticking to it enough. Or on the other side, if it's the carnivore, oh, well, it's because you're having eggs and dairy. You should be just having just meat. Like they'll always push it to, you're not doing the advice enough. I certainly not claim that I'm the only one who, is more interested in working out what's actually going on in nuance. There are loads of good practitioners who are, just to be fair. But unfortunately, the people who tend to rise to the top and the ones who build huge audiences are often the people who tell you it's simple, because that's what people want to hear. So, in the medical world, you have the just take this pill, and that's what people want to hear. And the people who give you the pill that make you feel better temporarily, that's the system that is popular. But in the alternative world, and then in that medical system, they usually say diet doesn't matter, or maybe it's a factor for being overweight and stuff, but they'll say, diet has no impact on X disease, or doesn't have much of an impact on Y disease. But in our world, the alternative or natural health world, it's the complete opposite. And they go, all drugs are bad, all medications are bad. A lot of them say, all supplements are bad. And all you need to do is just stick to this diet. And it's the primal diet, or it's the this diet, or it's the that diet. And if you just do that, everything will be great. And of course, there's versions of this as well. There's, you just got to do this herbal regime. You just got to do this fast. You just got to, meditate with these crystals. I mean, whatever it might be. But it's this, all the problems are caused by this X one simple thing, and all your problems are caused by this. And you just got to do this thing that I'm telling you. And if that works, I mean, that's great. And often it works. These people wouldn't build huge followings and audiences if it never worked. But I think there's two reasons why it works. Sometimes the person is accurate, right? Some people are better off following that advice, whatever it may be. And so, if you give advice that is correct even 30% of the time, but you manage to give it to 3 million people, then 900,000 of them are going to be cured, right? They're going to be better, and they're going to go, great, awesome, that works. That's the best system ever. So that's one reason. And then the other reason is the placebo effect, right? Which is significant. And that's not to discount anything. The placebo effect is very powerful. We need to talk about that in an episode at some point. Placebo effect is not to say it's not real, but what I mean is that the person is healed through the power of the mind's action on, and I say mind in the broadest sense, including feelings and visuals and everything, but the mind's action on the body, the gene expression of the body. We talked about gene expression in the last episode. Like, that's absolutely possible as well. I don't just believe that. There's a mountain of evidence to say it's possible. Every drug that ends up in the market, medical drug, has to go through double-blind, placebo-controlled trials before it's allowed. Why? Because there is a fundamental understanding that if you do not do that, then the person's belief that the drug will work will impact how much it works. So the very basis of a medical pharmaceutical establishment is based on the fact that the placebo effect is a real thing. So anyway, I could do more detail on that in another episode. But the point is, yeah, if you're told, just eating vegetables or just eat meat or whatever, and all your problems will go away, often it does work for a while because people really believe it does, and they're spending time on real life or, usually on online forums or whatever, talking to other people who say it's working for them, may well be telling the truth. And so but then it doesn't work for that long. That's the thing, right? The placebo effect is interesting. It's very powerful, but it often isn't long lasting. So it might last a few months, maybe if it's really powerful, a year or two, but it's not going to last for 5 years or 10 years usually. Like, whatever problem you had that you thought was cured because of this thing that actually is just a placebo will tend to come back if it is the placebo effect. So that's one of the ways you can differentiate between placebo effect and not in practice, in my experience. So that is why I don't love it. But, so that's why I think a lot of the time when people give this very simplistic, just do this diet or just do this herb or whatever, and you'll be better, does work. But what about all the people it doesn't work for? And as I said, in my experience, that usually half the people or more. And so generally then they get faced with a strategy, and this is not necessarily from the guru. This could be from the guru's followers. This could be, encoded into their work, right? Like throughout the guru's book or course, there might be like messaging that if it doesn't work for you, you must be doing it wrong. There's this thing called gaslighting, which is a term that has come into modern culture like recently over the last few years. And so this is
if it's not working for you, first of all, they say, yes, it is. No, you know, it is working for you. And then that, oh, okay then. And then it's like, well, okay, it's not working yet, but it will soon. Stick with it, right? And then that obviously can keep you going for a while longer. But if you eventually are like, no, it's not working, you can't persuade me it is, and no, I'm not going to keep doing it when it's not working, then you get to, well, it's your fault. You've been doing it wrong. Some people jump straight to that, but more commonly that's like, you know, the second or third thing that you hear. But you will end up hearing it if you are like, hey, look, you know, I've really tried this. I've given it a good go. It's not working. You'll hear, well, you must have been doing it wrong. Like, they cannot imagine that the advice that they've given that has worked for so many people, right? Sometimes these are very well-meaning people. I've got millions of followers who say it works for them. So you must be the problem, right? That's what they say. That may even be what they believe. But of course, what does that do to you as the recipient of that message? If you take that on board and take it to heart, you mean, there's something fundamentally wrong with me. You know, I'm flawed, or I'm lazy, I'm undisciplined, I'm stupid, I must have misunderstood. Like, all of this negative self-esteem stuff can come up, and it's really not great. And now, I mean, that's not great even if everything they said to you is accurate and true. But if what they're saying is a lie, you know, intentional or not, it's really toxic to tell you it's your fault when in fact you've been doing nothing wrong. And I guess maybe that's the reason I used the example I did earlier about the person who had stomach ulcers because they were eating a healthy diet by almost everyone's standards. And then as soon as they stopped eating the healthy diet and ate a diet that looked less healthy but was better for them, you know, it went away and hasn't come back. So that's why I think it's really important to understand this distinction and not get caught up in simplistic, you know, just do this one thing and it will work for everyone thinking. And that's why it's so important to me to bring this to the world.
We're going to take a quick break to share with you one of our amazing sponsors, Genetic Insights. What makes Genetic Insights uniquely valuable is that they test over 83 million different variants, which guarantees a 99.7% accuracy on all of their DNA reports. With over 100 reports available, you get comprehensive insights into what your DNA is telling you about how to optimize your health today and in the future. I found reviewing my results to be incredibly accurate and applying some of the recommendations, which are personalized to your individual DNA, to be extremely helpful for me and my family. I also loved how easy it was to upload my raw DNA data that I already had from previously using Ancestry.com because Genetic Insights supports uploading raw data from all major platforms. To get your health reports, go to geneticinsights.co and get 20% off today by using coupon code Rejuvenate. Remember that supporting our sponsors supports our podcast, which allows us to keep sharing this important information with you free of cost. So, go get your Genetic Insights health reports by going to geneticinsights.co and use coupon code Rejuvenate for 20% off today. Thank you. No, that's very helpful because there's I've been, done it myself of like, oh, why isn't it working? What's wrong with me? What am I not doing? Or is there something like, what's the problem? You almost get so despondent, like it's just never going to work. So why even continue to move forward with it? I guess this is it.
Absolutely.
So no, thank you for all of that. Cause that helps everybody continue to like, no, we can still continue. You can still continue to look, uncover, dig deeper, go here, go there, and find some more, avenues where there are more answers. So don't give up. There's plenty of options out there. So then that takes me to, when somebody does have their wellness report, their Genetic Insights report that they've received, how easy is it to read these and to understand the information that has come through on the report?
That's a good question. I mean, we try and make it as easy as possible. We're not set up for a share screen today, but maybe I'll ask our editor to patch some like screenshots in or something like that to actually show. But basically what it is, so no matter what topic you're interested in, so let's say you're interested in, what we talked about a lot, do I have an underactive thyroid, right? You just find it in the list of reports, you click the download button and you end up with this report. So when you get that, you open it, you can open it on any device, it's just a PDF.
It's nothing special. And then, you've got the cover. The first 2 pages after that, pages 2 and 3, are me introducing the subject, just reminding you of the stuff that we talked about in the first episode, about how all this stuff works, very brief overview. And then page 5 to 8 are, again, just covering what we've learned, really mainly in the previous episode, like how it actually works. So those first usually 8 pages are the same in every single report. Once you've seen one, you kind of have seen them all. Why do we put them in every report? First of all, because we don't know which one you're going to read first. So we want it there no matter what you're going to go for. Second of all, we encourage you to share your reports with others. And so again, when someone else sees the report for the first time, we want them to understand what they're looking at. So that's why we have the intro always there. However, if you've seen the intro, you thoroughly, absorbed it and understood it, in general, you can skip straight ahead to page 9. And so this is the first don't miss page. And this basically gives the risk score. And if applicable, which it usually is, the top 5 recommendations. There's no detail. It's just, here's the risk, here's your recommendations. It's the most brief overview possible, right? And so, we do it that way because if, say, you have an average risk and you're already doing all the recommendations, you don't need to read any further, right? You're done. But let's say, you're interested because you've got a high risk, or maybe it's not a risk, maybe it's a type, like we talked about the carbohydrate types, right? So I'm someone who is, a high type or a low type or whatever. Then you can continue. And so the next couple of pages gives more detail. This is what the report's actually about. What is a thyroid? What does it mean if it's underactive? Just, again, we don't assume that you have any of this knowledge and understanding already. We give you an overview. There's lots of links to scientific papers for that. And then usually, and we're getting better and better at this, we'll actually list the SNPs. So we talked last episode about what the SNPs are. So we've just made the assertion that this is your risk and these are your recommendations. We don't just say because we said so. Well, usually we say because you have these SNPs, right? So there are all these SNPs. So these are the sections of the gene that we're looking at, and then we'll say, and this is the variant you have. So most people have CC in this spot. You have CT. That is a variant, and that means this or whatever. If you have no idea what I just said, no interest, no problem. You can absolutely skip over that. You do not need to understand it at all to help yourself or to be fully informed even. It's only there for those people who don't want to take it on face value, who want to do the research themselves. Then you can look up every SNP, you can look up every variation, you can find out all about it if you want to. But that's nowhere near required. That's just if you want. But you can happily skip that as well if you want. Now the next section is really the most important in many cases, and that's the recommendations. So the recommendations can be very simple. Sometimes there's only one, and sometimes there's none even. If it's like a trait that we occasionally have in there that is just the way it is, and there's no scientific evidence that you can do anything about it, that doesn't always mean that there's nothing you can do about it. First of all, this is not too common, but I'm going to talk about the exceptions. So in the occasions where there's no recommendations, it's because there's not enough scientific evidence yet that any lifestyle or dietary or supplement changes will affect that. Doesn't mean that they won't, just means that the evidence isn't there yet. Our recommendations are only there if there is a sufficient amount of scientific evidence to put them there. If there is some evidence, there won't be a recommendation. There needs to be a lot of evidence for there to be a recommendation. As I said, we don't recommend drugs. When it comes to substances, we do tend to recommend supplements that are fairly common and well known, like magnesium and vitamin D3 and curcumin, and the ones that are well studied because they have been well studied and therefore they've been studied with a lot of different genetic variants that they actually do have an impact. And so, yeah, if there's no recommendations, it's just because there's not enough evidence yet. Usually there'll be at least one. So just for instance, with my lead report I talked about in the last episode, I have a tendency to break down lead very slowly. The one recommendation with that is don't be exposed to lead. Right? It's pretty simple. And I guess with the gluten intolerances, it's pretty similar, right? If you might have a gluten intolerance, then maybe don't have gluten. So sometimes it's as simple as that. Often there's more to it, right? So for instance, if you do, we talked about the weight loss one, then, exercise is probably going to feature there somewhere. Eating a certain type of diet is going to feature somewhere, although often that's not the same. Like different people have different recommendations in that regard. Maybe certain vitamins and certain herbs to be recommended there. Obviously, lowering caloric intake to some degree is going to be recommended there. These are all going to be mainstream recommendations. So everything has to be backed up by loads of science. So my opinion would be someone needs to focus more on speeding up their metabolism, but that is not the mainstream scientific perspective. So that's not going to be on the list. Again, the list of recommendations is 100% above board, approved by all the government agencies that are breathing down the necks of anyone that they don't like. They're 100% kosher, whatever the word might be. So now what does vary is the order that they're in, So for one person, assuming there's more than one. So for one person, one recommendation may be at the top of their list. For another person, likely a different recommendation will be at the top of the list. You asked me about how to read the report. So literally it'll just say, here's what it is. Here's what it could do. Here's a link to, or links to studies that show that it can help with this. And here's like suggested action. And all that's within a few sentences. We try and keep it as simple as possible. We don't do any kind of advertising within that at all, right? We don't recommend our products. If a product is recommended, which it certainly is not, probably more than half the time, but if it is, you can go and get that wherever you want. Obviously, we appreciate it if you get it from us, but if it's easier for you to ship it, in the country you're in from somewhere local or get it down the road or whatever you want to do, totally fine. As long as it's good quality, that's totally up to you. So you go through the recommendations. As I say, sometimes there's one, sometimes there's 20-ish. It really depends. But if there is a lot of them, we do not recommend people try and do them all at once. And this is when the order becomes more important. Most people get overwhelmed when they have too much to do.
I was going to say, yes, please speak to that, because otherwise some people are like, okay, I'm going to do it all. And they start and they just go. So if you could please go a little deeper on that part to help everybody that's listening, that'd be great.
Awesome. Yeah. So there's this thing called the law of 80-20. And so this is a really interesting law, probably not popular in the current climate, but current political climate. But it's basically the idea, let's make it completely free of any politics and say that generally in business, it's kind of acknowledged that 80% of the work you do gets 20% of the results, and 20% of the work you do gets 80% of the results. There's also an interesting thing in business that 20% of your customers will tend to bring 80% of your income, something like that. Sometimes it's actually more extreme skew than that. Sometimes it's like 5% of your customers will bring 80% of your income, something like that. It's like a crazy thing like that. If you think about it, it does depend on the nature of your job. If you're on an assembly line all day, like I used to be, this is not so true. If you're literally doing exactly the same movement every day, but most people in their jobs, like there's a period of their day, maybe half an hour, where they probably get more actual productive work done than the rest of the hours put together. So there's that kind of tendency. So anyway, that's the law of 80-20. It's called the Pareto principle. You can look it up if you'd like to. But the point is, this principle absolutely needs to be applied to your health endeavors. And so the reason why the ordering of the recommendations is so important, and the reason why the fact that we order it based on your unique genetics is so important, is because not only can you often not do everything, but there's no need to. You just need to do the most important things. So what I would do is just start with the first recommendation, the top recommendation, and ask yourself the question honestly, am I already doing this? If the answer is yes, give yourself a pat on the back, give yourself a high five. Well done, that's great. And then move on to the second one, right? As soon as you hit a recommendation that you're not already doing, then that's the one that you may want to start, right? Whatever it may be. Now, I say may want to start. You can always scroll down, because say maybe you're not doing recommendation 2 and 3, but recommendation 2 is going to be really difficult for you for whatever reason, and recommendation 3 is going to be really easy. Maybe do 3, right? Use a little bit of common sense with that. But and ditto, like if we ever recommend something that you know is not a good idea, then don't do it. Like, so general, like we don't know everything about you, you know, it's not a crystal ball. So, you know, if we recommend something to you, be like, oh, but last time I had that, I had an allergic reaction, don't have it, you know, like, unfortunately, you know, the one thing that we're not at the stage of being able to do yet is to put it all into one huge thing. And so, yes, another report may have said to you, you know, like, don't eat dairy, but there might be another report that says dairy is good for this condition. It's saying that dairy is good for that condition in general, and it's saying that the SNPs in you that cause that issue in you respond to dairy, but it doesn't say that you globally as a person respond well to dairy. You may have different SNPs that mean you have a lactose intolerance or a casein intolerance, right? So you do have to bear that in mind. So if it's not a good idea, don't do it, right? So I guess the first question is, am I already doing it? Second question is, do I know of any reason why this would not be a good idea? If you can answer yes, if you can answer no to both of those questions, then you can go in and go, maybe I should actually do it. Right? And then just do 1 or 2 is probably what I'd recommend. Now, this varies a little bit. If like one report you've identified, this is my issue, this is my big thing, like my friend with the underactive thyroid, maybe you do the top 3 or the top 5, right? I'll leave that up to you. But if it's just one of, you know, maybe a dozen reports that you've identified that are areas you want to work on, probably just do 1, you know, if that, just start with 1. And go from there. Now, the other thing is you may see commonalities, and this is a really good clue. So I see this over and over again when I go through it with people. So I just use eat dairy as an example. Like I went through the reports with someone well known, and will not share anything personal. The only thing that I'll say is what was interesting to me is that the recommendation eat dairy came up several times. Now, that's not that common. It's not the first time I've seen that recommendation, but it's definitely the first time I've seen it come up several times with the reports that someone had issue with. And there was no indications that it was a bad thing for them. I checked that as well. And I asked them, does dairy agree with you? They said, yeah. They said, I don't eat it, but because, you know, some guru told me it's not good for me. But yeah, I've never had an issue with it. It's never caused mucus or, you know, anything. I'm like, well, it seems to be indicating it for you, right? So the fact that it says, and then they were having like this, you know, plant-based milk, almond milk or whatever. And I was like, yeah, the amount of chemicals and stuff and those things, like if you have a dairy allergy, then you are better off with the chemicals because, as I said, anything that you have an allergy or intolerance to, your body's acting like it's a poison anyway. But if you don't, if your body's totally fine with it, you might be better off just having milk than having almond milk, you know, as long as there's not some ethical reason not to, at least, which it wasn't in their case. So, you know, patterns. You might see vitamin D3 recommended over and over again. I've seen that a few times. Or iron. Maybe that happened with you, Chrissy. I can't quite remember. It's been quite a while now. But I think iron came up for you like many, many times. Yeah. And so we go, okay. So that's another way to read them and prioritize them. You could do a little, you know, just write the recommendations down that you think you want to follow. And then, you know, every time you have the same thing again, you can like put a tick next to it or something. And then maybe you could just start with the things that have the most ticks next to it. It's like, oh, well, that's been recommended 5 times. That's been recommended 3 times. I'll just do those to start with, you know? And that's a much, much smarter way of doing it, in my mind, than doing it randomly. And of course, that's what we try and facilitate. Now, if that still sounds complicated, as I said, you can just do one thing at a time. That's one way of doing it. So you can just go, you know what, for this month, this week, whatever feels manageable, I'm just going to focus on this one report, and I'm just going to do the top 1, 2, 3 recommendations or whatever. You can make it as simple as that, right? That's totally fine. You're still making progress that way. You might think, oh, that's not enough progress, and I'm highly motivated. But here's the thing. You make more progress doing just one step going in the right direction then you make doing 50 steps going in the wrong direction. This is what most people are doing most of the time in my experience. Because I tend to work with quite highly motivated people, either because they're highly motivated in general, these successful people, or because they're highly motivated because they're really suffering, one or the other. And so, I tend to work with people who are already doing a lot. And I find that the issue, they think that they're not doing enough, and the issue is usually that they're doing the wrong thing. So it's much better to do something that has a lot of evidence that's going to be a good idea than just because someone told me to, or because it felt right at the time, or, because unfortunately feelings change, right? Depending on a lot of different factors. And a lot of people are very adept at manipulating feelings, right? Like making you feel certain things. Anyone who's ever attended a health summit, right? You listen to 30 often very highly charismatic speakers and experts, and you listen to this one and they're like, wow, yeah, that's really convincing. I should try that. And then you listen to the next one and they're like, oh yeah, that's also really convincing. I should not do that. I should do the complete opposite. So it's like, it's very easy to be swayed by this stuff if you're actually into it. And ditto if you're not into it, if this is all, oh God, I don't care about any of this, I just want to be well, then it's very easy to just go, anyone who sounds authoritative and confident enough to just go with what they think, because you don't know. So, if they sound like they do, I'll just go along with them. But it's so worthwhile it's so helpful to do. And honestly, I sometimes get this wrong. Like I speak to clients, I give them several recommendations, and a lot of the time they don't do them. Like most of the examples I gave, the person only did one or two things, I think, everything I've said. And yet that's all they actually needed to do to feel massively better. Now, would they feel better if they did the 3 or 4 other things that I also recommended? Probably. But it's that 80-20 thing again, right? Like just doing those 1 or 2 things was enough for them. They're feeling so much better. They're fine. They're happy with that. So that's a choice. That's a question of what you want to prioritize.
No, those are really good things. And as well too, sometimes, doing so much so soon, it can be overwhelming for an individual to make so many lifestyle changes. So it could be that you implement that first thing, and then a little while later you implement the next thing, and so on and so forth. And then you can, for me, that's how my lifestyle changes. I've been able to adopt it. It's very difficult to just, for me, a sudden stop, like that's it, drop everything, and like, no, let's do some gradual things here, because then it just tends to be more lasting for me. So I have a question about when in the reports, let's say we get some conflicting, I think you've kind of touched on it earlier, get some conflicting contradictions of what could be good to do. Can you speak to us a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So this can be tricky. Like an example I can think of, I won't give the person's name, but I'm sure they'd be happy to be used as an example, because we spoke about it before, is to do with stress. So we have a stress report, we have an anxiety report, and then we have the COMT report. And I talked about the COMT report in the last episode. Again, you've got to watch that if you haven't already before this one, for it to make sense. I won't repeat it again. But as we talked about last time with the COMT report, with a certain reading, it means you clear away stress chemicals quickly. With a certain reading, you clear them away slowly. So this person had a fast COMT. So I said to them, are you someone who's like easily, takes things in their stride, quickly recovers from stressful situations and all the rest of it? And they were like, nope. I really struggle with it. I have anxiety. I find it very difficult to recover from stress. I was like, okay. I guess it's wrong then. All right. And then I look at their stress report, high tendency towards stress. I look at their anxiety report, high tendency towards anxiety. I look at their psychological trauma report, high tendency to find it difficult to overcome psychological trauma. Obviously, a genetic report cannot predict how much you're going to be traumatized, but what it's saying is how much you will internalize that versus be able to let it go and forgive and forget and, genuinely move on and move past it. For some people, it's just harder. And so that's, the genetic reports can predict that. So I was like, okay. So I was looking at that and I was like, well, okay. So one thing is saying you should be able to overcome stress easily, but the other 3 are saying that you shouldn't. So I guess that, overall, that is correct according to what you're telling me, but still they're contradicting, right? And then I said to them, I said, do you find it difficult to focus? And they're like, oh yeah, terribly. I've always thought I might have ADD. It's really difficult to focus. And so it turns out in this person's case, they kind of had the worst of both worlds. They had the downside of their body clearing away dopamine quickly, which is one of the stress chemicals that COMT clears away quickly. But they had the downside of having a tendency towards very elevated noradrenaline, adrenaline, and cortisol. So while that it would not be it would not take that person as long to recover from a stressful situation as someone who's truly slow comped, because they had such a tendency for it to be elevated, and because often they were distressed by their lack of ability to focus. That's the other interesting thing. When dopamine is chronically low, if a person is kind of lazy or, go with the flow kind of person, then they just kind of accept it and they get used to kind of get maybe manipulating other people to do things for them or settling for not that much or whatever. Different strategies, right? But in this case, this person had like a high degree of work ethic, like belief that they should be doing a lot. And so they were constantly kind of upset and stressed at their lack of ability to focus. And so they were creating the stress, a little bit like I talked about with fast comped people. They often create stress and drama in their lives because it's the only time they feel okay. It's the only time they can really focus and the only time that they really feel motivated. So the description of you can easily overcome stress did not apply to them because of these, other variants, these other varying factors, the tendency to high stress in general, the tendency to high anxiety. But it was still true. So that could be a little bit of a difficult one. I mean, I know that's only one example. There aren't that many examples. I mean, let's think, like with sleep, I suppose you could have one where it says, I haven't come across this, but you could have like, you don't sleep deeply, but you do wake up feeling refreshed, something like that. That can sound like a contradiction that, we have a, one report is how deeply you sleep, and one report is how refreshed you feel when you wake up. So that can seem like a contradiction, but it isn't always in practice. I haven't seen a specific genetic example of this yet, but I know people who I've seen their what they call the aura ring results, where they have way less deep sleep than me, and yet they wake up feeling like totally fine. So in this case, even though it seemed to be a contradiction, I didn't see their genetics. That's before I had the access to genetics. But even though it seemed to be a contradiction, in practice it worked. And so often I see that as well. Things that appear to be a contradiction aren't actually in practice. I'll give like another example for me. So I felt really, and so this is more a contradiction between my experience and my results, as opposed to two different sets of results from two reports. But I felt really great for quite a while. I actually don't currently, but I felt great for quite a while supplementing with extra oxytocin, which is a particular hormone. And it really felt like it was giving me what I needed until I now feel satiated with it. But it was doing that for quite a while. And when I got my report, I was expecting it to say low level oxytocin, because honestly, my whole life, I've kind of felt like a low oxytocin person for various reasons. I won't go into that. I've talked about oxytocin a lot in other episodes. But, basically in a nutshell, it makes you feel satisfied and happy and fulfilled and relaxed. So, and, having high oxytocin isn't all bad. People who tend to have low oxytocin tend to be, highly motivated often, but it tends to come more from a motivation like I'm not enough, rather than a motivation like I'd love to do that. So it's not the best form of motivation, but still, people with low oxytocin often tend to get a lot done on the plus side, and often can be successful as a result. So anyway, I didn't have that, but what I had is high cortisol. That I do have a genetic tendency to that, and I had several test results that back that up, that was my reality. And so oxytocin and cortisol are conflicting with each other. And so even though I didn't have the genetic tendency for low oxytocin, with hormones, What matters is less is the level of them, and what matters a lot more is the ratio, like how much you have of one thing compared to another thing. This is really true of the sex hormones. You know, a lot of people want a certain level of testosterone or a certain level of estrogen or whatever, but it's the ratio between them that is more important than any individual hormone. And we talk about that more in the hormones episode. And so that's another example where, you know, where something to begin with may appear to contradict your actual real world experience or maybe test results that you've got. Sometimes there is a reason for it. And sometimes we're just wrong. And I would say the amount that we're wrong will vary on a few different factors. First of all, the younger the person is doing it, the less that we're going to appear to be accurate, because they might not have had the issue yet. You know, my reports would have seemed a lot less accurate if I'd have done them 10 years ago than now, because I hadn't developed those issues yet, you know, so, or I hadn't become aware of them. That's the other thing. You know, often people have no idea. Like my friend talked about this, who they said, you know, one of their genetic reports is like a strong tendency to vitiligo, which is where you get a little bit of a discoloration. Again, it's a subtle autoimmune thing, which I have a little bit of a tendency to occasionally as well. And, or did, I don't know if I still do. Who knows? We'll see. And they were like, oh yeah, and then they were telling their wife about it. And she said, no, you got that. It's here. And they were like, it's like, oh, I didn't know that. Okay. So you know, that happens as well, right? There are things that we don't even realize that we have, until someone else points it out, whether it's a wife, whether it's a doctor, you know, or whatever. So that can be a thing as well. But anyway, back to accuracy. So the older we get, the more problems and issues tend to show up, and the more aware we become of things over time, generally. So that, we're like, oh yeah, that is true. So that's one factor. But another factor is lifestyle. This goes back to the central thing I think we were talking about in the previous episode about, you know, fate versus free will, and how much of it is how much of it is out of your control and how much of it you can change. And so you can change a significant amount with your lifestyle. And I absolutely see this in practice, because again, I tend to see two types of people: either people who really struggled, who've tried everything and are suffering, or people who are like really on it and always trying to optimize and always trying to be better. I don't tend to get too many casual people. And so I get quite a lot of people who are wanting to be better and already like doing way more than 99% of people to be healthy. And so, to be honest, the reports are less accurate. But in terms of, there's quite a few things that they have a higher risk for that they don't have. But here's the thing. When we then look at the recommendations for that person, they're usually already doing most of the recommendations and have been for a long time. So it almost proves the theory again. I don't think I've seen any case yet where a person has lots of, or I don't know, more than one or two anyway, high risk reports where they do not do the recommendations and they do not have the issue by the time they're, say, even 30, let alone 40 or 50. And some of the recommendations are common things like exercise, right? So I speak to a lot of people who are, you know, really into fitness and stuff, and that absolutely is good for you for many reasons, as has been shown. Can you overdo exercise? Yes, you can overdo anything, but broadly, you know, it's generally better to do it than to not do it. And so, you know, I think that's one of the things as well. I guess I don't know if that quite answers your question in terms of contradiction, but yeah, again, contradiction between what the person's actually reporting and what you're actually feeling versus what the genetics are saying. Those are all the kind of variants I see.
Thank you. Yeah, because then that also it's going to take me, which is a great lead into my next question, which really, I mean, we know that the testing cannot determine whether somebody's going to have the signs or symptoms. It doesn't necessarily say that they will ever, you know, show up, any of these things will ever show up in their life. But where I'm going with this is, let's say somebody does have that high risk percentile of something that could be ultimately very damaging. And so with their emotional response to that, because even though it may not be presenting, just receiving that information of the possibility, as we know with the placebo effect, with, you know, you mentioned earlier, the power of emotions, the power of the mind, you know, how how does somebody handle getting something like that and receiving this information that, it's not a definite by any means, but there is that emotional component there?
That's a great question. And I think that's the most challenging aspect of what we do, to be honest. So it's a great question. It's tricky. This is a tricky thing for anyone who is genuinely a hypochondriac. Now, I know that a lot of people are made to feel like they are by medical doctors who are not interested in finding out what's really going on with them. So I think the genuine hypochondriac is relatively rare. Maybe they don't even exist. But yeah, I mean, there are those people that every single slight thing they have, they think it is a life-threatening disease, right? That does happen. And so I guess I just never come across them, but I'm sure they exist. If someone has high anxiety, even if they're not that way in general, that can start to happen. And that's what happened to me a few years ago when I did have very high anxiety. Like small things, I would blow into a big thing. And so I completely understand that tendency. This is always the danger of knowledge. This goes all the way back to the Garden of Eden, right? Is it a good thing to be given the knowledge of good and evil? Is it a good thing to be given the knowledge of what could happen? Or is ignorance in fact bliss? It's hard to say for sure. And it does depend on the person. As I say, if the person is extremely neurotic, if they're extremely prone to anxiety that they cannot let go of, then maybe only get the anxiety reports that will confirm to you what you already know. Maybe only get the emotional wellness one. Don't get any other, more classic disease-based ones, and just work on that first. I guess that would be my practical recommendation, right? It would probably tell you have a high anxiety and that you have high stress and all the rest, which you already know, but it will give you some practical recommendations based on your genetics, So that's a partly serious answer. But yeah, for people who don't want to listen to that, they still want to know about the health issues, what would I recommend? Here's the thing. Because we are giving recommendations, not just risk scores, I feel relatively okay with that, right? Yeah, so even with people who are extremely hypochondriac, still, if you give them something that they can do about it, they often feel better. So this is the thing where, again, I don't know if this is real or if it's just a cliche, but the person who constantly goes to the doctor because they feel like they're dying and the doctor just gives them some sugar pills, tells them it's medicine and sends them on their way. Just the fact that they've been given something for it often will make the anxiety go away. So we're not giving you sugar pills, we're giving you real scientifically validated recommendations in, as I say, the vast majority of cases. And so I would say if you do have that tendency, focus less on the risk and more on what you can do and just how effective that is. By all means, if you are, neurotic, highly anxious people also tend to be skeptical people. I'm not knocking that. I'm a big fan of skepticism. I think it can go too far like anything, but generally I think it's a good quality in this day and age. So by all means, follow the links in terms of the studies that show that these various recommendations work, or do your own research, Google it, whatever. As I said, none of what we recommend in our reports is obscure and esoteric and arcane. It's all very mainstream. It's pretty much all very easily Googleable. So just look it up, convince yourself that this is something that can help. And, prevent, help to minimize chances. I mean, we're not allowed to use the word prevent, I think, either, but minimize the risk. Minimize the risk of this ever becoming a problem for you. And then second of all, if none of that is helpful enough advice, just go to the doctor and say, I'm worried that I might have X, and get them to test you for it. Then when they tell you don't have it, you can go, okay, that's good. I don't want to get it. Let me do these recommendations to, again, we can guarantee anything, but to minimize my risk as much as I can. And then I'd also recommend, beyond that, and sometimes this is recommended within the reports, although, more general, like recommendation and relaxation techniques is often recommended if there's evidence for it. But maybe, as I kind of said earlier about starting with the emotional wellness reports, and also look at, beyond just calming yourself down and making yourself feel happy, like focusing on learning about the power of the mind, learning about the placebo effect, like I just said, learn about the nocebo effect, which is you can make yourself sick with your mind as much as you can make yourself well with your mind. The thing about the placebo effect that's unfortunate is that usually only works if it's unconscious. So you can't talk yourself into being healthier, but you can shift your health if you genuinely believe something. But there is a technology to change genuine beliefs that's starting to develop. You know, someone I mention a lot in this regard is Dr. Joe Dispenza. Not because he's the first person to teach these kind of principles. They've been being taught for, you know, maybe back to the dawn of civilization, if you want to get technical. And there's a history of them, you know, going back at least 200 years, I would say, that's quite extensive. But what I like about him is he's done a lot of scientific research. Like he's actually paid for the tests to show that this stuff works. And I've been part of one of his research studies once to, you know, in his attempts to ascertain that. So, you know, he's not the only one, but yeah, go and find someone like him or someone else who looks at the power of the mind, how you can make your mind work for you rather than against you, and who has done a lot of scientific studies or, you know, references a lot of scientific studies that are relevant, that supports their position. So you can actually start to convince yourself, you know what, I need to start using my mind differently. Now, if it's too difficult for you to start to use your mind differently because the anxiety is truly compulsive and you can't stop yourself, it's like an addiction, then that's an issue, right? And that's something that you want to work with a doctor, with a therapist, with a psychiatrist, with a whatever, right? Like someone to get yourself to the point where although you may still have anxiety, maybe that will always be with you to some degree, you can massively reduce, you can at least get it to the point where you can go, I'm doing it again. Let me shift my focus.
Great. Thank you. Very, very helpful. I think you touched on what my next question is going to be a little bit in this, which is essentially, you know, let's say somebody's they've got their results. So, you know, what do they do once they get them? What would your recommendation be for, you know, they've just received everything. What's next?
Yeah, it's a good question. So let's say they've just invested, right? And they signed in, and they got all these reports available. What do you do? So we talked about how to read them, but yeah, how do you approach it in general? So I'd say there's, you know, a couple of different ways to do it. And this depends a little bit if you're going for a collection or if you're going for the limitless package. If you're going for a collection because you have a specific goal, right? So we talked about it in the last episode, but I can list them again. So maybe you've got allergies, intolerances, and sensitivities. Maybe you want to, you know, reduce premature aging. Maybe it's you want to have balanced blood sugar. Maybe you want, you know, brain health, memory, focus, that kind of thing. Maybe it's your cardiovascular system. Maybe you want to support detoxification. Maybe it's digestive health. Maybe it's emotional well-being. Maybe it's hair, skin, and beauty, so appearance-based stuff. Maybe it's hormonal balance. We talked about that in many episodes, how important that is. Maybe it's immune system optimization. It's increasing energy. Maybe you want to know your risk of infectious diseases for whatever reason. Maybe it's joint and bone health. Maybe it's kidney and urinary system. Maybe it's liver and gallbladder. Maybe it's oral health. Maybe it's pain reduction. Maybe it's respiratory. Maybe it's sleep optimization. Maybe it's weight loss. And maybe it's nutrient needs, which is, you know, as we talked about earlier, do I need more or less of every nutrient? So if you're going for any of those, whichever one it may be, what I'd recommend, and often they're, you know, usually it's between 15 to, I think 50 is the most with the nutrient needs, but usually it's more like 15 to 30 is how many you're going to get. It's not that many. As I said, it's literally only anything between 2 and, 10 pages per report, which you can largely just, you know, scan through if you don't want to read the whole thing, if you're just checking it. So it's not an overwhelming amount. What I recommend is if you're doing a collection, just start with the ones you're most interested in. And you might be most interested in for a few different reasons. Maybe it just catches your eye. Maybe it's a thing that you think you might have. Maybe it's a thing that you know that you have. Maybe it's a thing you're concerned you might have or get because you know some parent or other family member has it. So you're concerned it's in the, you know, that it runs in the family. Yeah, I mean, I guess maybe there's other reasons, but something like that, right? So just base it on that. Start with what you're most interested in, and then go from there. And as I said, maybe you only, you know, if you're easily overwhelmed and you like to take things slow, maybe check one once a day. or maybe even more once a week. Just look at one at a time, take it in, think about it, tell other people about it, talk about it, get some feedback. This thing says I have a tendency to be anxious. Do you agree with that? Does that sound right to you? This thing, recommends I eat a low-fat diet. What do you think? Get that feedback if you're that kind of person who likes to do that. Talk about it with people, talk about it on social media, do whatever you want, right? If that's your process. If you're not that kind of person at all and you just want to think about it, fine. If you're not that kind of person at all and you literally don't like overthinking anything and you just want to take action and you just immediately want to follow the recommendations, like the top 1, 2, 3, like we talked about, also fine. Do what works for you. Go with whatever style suits you in that regard. And then just get through them, right? Do any whatever order they interest you in. You might not even get to all of them. As I said before, you might find within the first few reports that you go to, the answers you've been looking for are there. You get some kind of clarity and or some kind of recommendation that sets you off on a journey to resolve your problem. That's what happened to me. That's what happens to most people again and again. So, there's no virtue in and of itself of going through all the reports unless your goal is to learn about all this. But if your goal is to be better, to prevent or, help to treat whatever it is, then you've met your goal as soon as you've done that, right? Don't worry about going through all the reports, right? So that's definitely the what I'd recommend if you're going through the one of the collections that I listed before. If you're going for the limitless and you have access to all of them, I'd recommend pretty much the same thing. But it's just going to be a bit trickier because you're going to have so much to do, and so it really depends on what kind of person you are. Like, I'm not that kind of person. I'm the kind of person who will voraciously go through it all, right? So you may stay up all night or all weekend reading through every report one after the other before you apply any of it. That's also okay if that's how you like to do things, right? It's really up to you. But I would recommend, even if you're that kind of person, still, after you've done that, go back to what I said, which is, okay, let me pick one. Let me look at the top 1 to 3 recommendations and let me do them. Because there is a certain amount of healing power just in awareness. This is something that is often taught in psychotherapy and stuff. Like, just accepting yourself as you are is hugely transformative, or can be. And that's often what a therapist will help you do, just by listening to you in a compassionate way. And that can be enough for some people who've never had that for whatever reason, that they can just start to accept themselves as they are, and the anxiety can start to dissipate, and the feeling of loneliness or insecurity, whatever, can start to dissipate, and just that can be transformative. That is possible, but more often some action also needs to be taken, right? So it is better to get that clarity, but then to also do something. That's true from a practical point of view, like you can't imagine more iron into your body if you're iron deficient or whatever. But it's also true for a psychological reason, which is if you're doing something, you will feel better about yourself. You will feel like less stress and anxiety about whatever the issue is, or depression, or whatever you have a tendency towards about the issue, because it feels like you're actually doing something, you're actually getting somewhere. So I do strongly recommend that you take action. And speaking of that, to go back to, I didn't quite finish talking about what the reports contain. So right at the end of the report, on the last page, is our what's next section. Now that's a little bit in flux at the moment because of various reasons I won't go into, but it will have my recommendations for what to do next. I'll try and sum it up for you in a nutshell. And what's likely is I'll tend to give you a links to more information. So if it's a report that's obviously on digestion, for instance, I'll probably link to the podcast episode that we did on digestion. And I might link to an article or some articles about digestion or something like that, right? It'll just be because the reports are very much like only about the subject matter that they're about. So it's good to often see them in a bigger context as well. Now, of course, you don't need to do that with every report, although if you want to do that and binge watch all our stuff, binge listen to it, then great, feel free, again, if you're that kind of person. But it's probably worth doing about your top issue or your top, 2 or 3 issues. Like, pursue it a little bit more. So don't only take in what the report says, but then also watch the video or listen to the audio or read the article and get like a bit more of an understanding of the big picture about that specific issue. That can really help as well to put it all in context.
Wonderful. Because that also just helps them, helps everyone. I mean, I know for me, I'm just like, give me more. I want to learn. So I can really understand the why of it, because that's one of the things that we've been discussing too, is like, if I know the why, then it makes the action a lot easier to follow through with.
Yep.
Yeah. So let's say, this is landed for our listeners and they're like, this is it. I'm doing it. I've got my reports, everything, like they're delving deep. What is really possible for somebody when they understand what impact their genes and, let's say these reports can have on their health?
That's a great question. And to be honest, I reckon there's probably more than I've even been able to think of yet, because it keeps unfolding for me. But what I'll say is it's at least a couple of things. So one of them is really dependent on you sharing it with others. So I might actually start with that first. If you, even selfishly, even if you're not an altruistic person, if you get the people closest to you in your life to also do it and get them to share their results with you or the results that are relevant, to you, and obviously you can't do this with, work colleagues and stuff like that. But I'm talking about, maybe parents, maybe siblings, maybe spouse, someone who's really close to you that you do have that intimate relationship with, where you kind of, you don't have that many secrets or maybe any secrets from each other. That can be so transformative. It can absolutely change the dynamics, the interpersonal dynamics, because it so helps all of you to accept each other and yourselves as you are. It can just be so huge, because otherwise there's so much people, and I'm definitely absolutely guilty of this, like people have so much judgments. And some people are much nicer about it than others, but even the people who are totally nice and totally charitable and totally, compassionate and friendly, there might still be a lot of the reason a lot of people consider accepting charity as like a negative thing is because they feel like the person giving charity is feeling superior to them or acting superior to them, which is never pleasant. So it's like, if you are afflicted, and from a spiritual point of view, it is an affliction. If you are afflicted with the belief that you are better than anyone or worse than anyone, a feeling of superiority or inferiority, it's so helpful to just see, look, we all have issues. And okay, I mean, I'll be honest, not everyone has the same amount of issues based on our reports. Although, of course, that can be misleading because some issues are worse than others and all the rest. But it's true. I do see some people with only a few high risk scores that aren't that many, maybe a dozen or something like that. And I see some people with several dozen. So you could say that one person is maybe being dealt a worse hand than another genetically. But I can also say that often the people who've been dealt a worse hand often have health issues earlier on, which means that they have to sort their lifestyle out earlier on, which means that often by the time they get older, they're actually in a better position than the person who didn't have so many issues. Why are they in the better position when they just had a problem earlier? Because it's a lot easier to change your ways and change your lifestyle in your 20s, like I had to do, than in your 50s. This is the classic story of the person who was totally fine, totally healthy, then suddenly in their 50-something, they have a heart attack, and the doctor says, you've got to change this and this and this, otherwise you're going to die. And they go, it's not happening, right? Like, I'm not changing that, whatever it may be. Yeah. And this happens a lot, right? You're laughing probably because it's happened to you, Chrissy. So there's an upside and downside to everything. And this is what this really helps you to see. You may have heard it before from a religious leader, a spiritual leader, a philosopher or whatever. Like, it's hard to judge who is better, who is worse, who has it better, who has it worse. And as I said, I'm not saying that we're all equal. Yes, some people do have more challenges and some people do have less on all kinds of levels, not just health, sociologically and income and et cetera, et cetera. I'm not denying any of that. But what I am saying is that it's really great to just realize, at least on this level that we're talking about, which is health and well-being, we all have our issues. and we can stop putting people up on a pedestal, and we can stop, looking down at people and just say, we all have our issues. So that's a really profound thing for your inner self and the world, I would say, right? One of the issues is that one of the issues of the world, one of the reasons we don't have world peace, and I realize it's only one, you could say there's many others, but one of them is that we have so much judgments about each other and such a lack of compassion towards ourselves and other people, right? So again, I'm not saying it's the only issue, and I'm not saying that boundaries and borders are not necessary and all that. Don't worry. But I'm just saying a bit more compassion is always helpful. Yes, maybe you can take it too far, but you can still have psychology, psychiatry, whatever, psychotherapy will teach this. You can have an immense amount of compassion, and you can also have healthy boundaries. It's not either or. But even if you're like, I'm not going to invite this person into my home or into my life, you can still accept I've got challenges, they've got challenges. We've all got challenges, right? It's a unifying thing. So that's my kind of high-minded big answer. On a practical, personal, selfish, individual level, imagine, now it depends on what position you're in. If you're already struggling and suffering with a lot of stuff, then imagine like finally understanding what's going on. That's not something that we can guarantee, but it's something that I see over and over again. And even if our reports may not be every answer, they should at least be a very helpful step along the way, right? They may say, oh, you might have an issue with this, and then you go and see a practitioner about that, and then they have the answer. So it may sometimes work out like that, but we're at least a helpful step along the way. That's what I experience. Ideally, we're giving you all the answers, and I absolutely see that as well sometimes. So yeah, that depends. It all depends on how challenging your situation is and how long you've had it and all the rest of it. So, and the other aspect of it is you don't have significant challenges, you can not have them. Oh my God. Like the main reason that I wanted to bring this to the world is, as I mentioned last episode, but I'll reiterate it. Back when I actually took the DNA that I ended up using to get my results, I didn't have hardly any health issues. I had some foods that I couldn't eat. That was pretty much it. I mean, other than that, and it turned out I was a bit underweight, but that really didn't bother me on an everyday level. So I felt great, and I felt so much better than I used to. I was just, happy. But it turned out, of course, that there were a lot of other issues. So, and I was just like, God, imagine if I'd had the results back then. And I could have prevented all this stuff happening in the first place, because I was highly motivated and I was quite disciplined and I was doing all this stuff for my health. I just wasn't doing the right stuff because I didn't know what my issues were and I didn't know what would help, So imagine having so much less suffering in whatever area and having so much, this is an unfair advantage. It really is over anyone else. And then, for those who don't care about being one up on anyone else, based on what I just talked about, imagine the capacity to help other people, right? And when it comes to that, don't immediately start thinking, I should get my brother one of these, I should get my mother one of these. No, start with you, Don't be telling them you need genetic insights. You do genetic insights, get benefit, and then tell them about the benefit that you've got, right? That's way more effective. Even if their problem is way worse than yours and you think that yours is nothing compared to theirs, still, it's usually more effective to say, that minor issue that I had, well, I did this thing that went away. They're like, oh, really? That's always more compelling. That's always more interesting. So I definitely recommend you do it that way. So yeah, you can help yourself, you can help other people, you can get on better with those around you, you can be part of the solution in the world. I really think it's that big. I really think it's that important. And again, there's not an idea. This is my experience. All of these things are my experience. This is my reality. And that's why I'm so excited to be able to share it.
You shared a really big thing there too. You used the DNA from when you were quite young prior to a lot of your health issues, coming up and stuff. So then I know that there's going to be some parents out there going, well, should I test my kids? What are your thoughts on that?
It's a great answer. God, yes. Now, with the one caveat we talked about earlier of if you're a very hypochondriac-y parent, you don't want to put into your kids, oh God, they're going to have all of these issues. But so if that's a tendency, then again, maybe follow the advice I just gave for that before doing it. But other than that, on a practical level, I mean, that was the biggest thing. As much as, you know, I felt like, God, I wish I'd had the ability to get these results in 2013 when I first took the sample. What I really felt was, God, I wish I'd known this when I was, you know, 13, like before I had any of these issues, you know? And I did so many unhealthy things between the ages of like 13 and 27 on every level, you know, physically, spiritually, emotionally. I mean, yeah, it was not a good time in my life. But and again, like if you'd have reached me and told me, you know, it's not a good idea to smoke or whatever, then that's fine. But if you'd have told me, and this is one of the things that actually got me to shift it, you know, is like I went to a dentist and he said, if you carry on, your gums are receding so quickly that your teeth are going to start falling out. And I was, whatever it was, 26, 27 at the time. I was like, that does not sound good, being toothless, you know? So it's like the reality of it actually made me quit, whereas the theory of it's generally not good for you didn't. So again, if I'd have seen, you know, I have a tendency to this serious issue, and the biggest recommendation is not smoking. Might that have got me to quit smoking earlier? I think probably, based on my experience. And ditto with a lot of other stuff, right? Might have got me to eat less sugar, drink less alcohol, be less stressed, and then also start doing all the positive things, right? Start exercising, start meditating, start whatever. Yes. So, because again, there's a difference, and this is partly like the male brain. That I tend to find, and again, I know this is a stereotype, a generalization, please forgive me about it if those kind of things upset you, but I find that men and women are like both easily tricked by different things generally. Women tend to be easily tricked by like a charismatic person with a lot of enthusiasm and confidence, but men tend to be easily tricked by science. And both of them can be very misleading in reality. So reason, maybe. So emotion and reason, just to simplify it. And both absolutely, you know, like as much as I'm talking about the validity of all the scientific studies we're using, I believe in the validity of them a lot because, you know, they're generally things that are not patented that are being studied. So that bias is a lot less. But we know that a lot of scientific studies are heavily biased by who's paying for them. Right? Especially when the thing in being tested is patentable. So this is, and yet, you know, so many people, but especially men, I just see falling for a hook, line and sinker. Oh, well, the science says so, therefore, right? So I would love it if, and part of the problem with that is that men are like, oh, well, you know, and people, but especially men are like, oh, the studies say. But they're general. They're so general, right? So the studies say this is good in general, but what about specifically? Even the dosage they give for drugs is like, take 2 tablets a day. No consideration if you're like 100 pounds or 300 pounds. Like, you know, or no consideration if you eat 1,000 calories a day or 4,000 calories a day. How does that make any sense? That it's the same dose no matter what? You could say, well, everyone has the same size heart and liver, and that's not true either. You know, people have different size organs, people have different size digestive system, people have different size everything to some degree, different size brains. So, let alone all the stuff in the brain and in the organs. So, you know, the generalizations I think are really a huge mistake. And whether that's a generalization that's more emotional, like everyone should eat this way because it feels good, or that's like everyone should do this because all the science says so, like neither of these things are helpful. To have something that's personalized is so much better. It's so much more helpful, so much more accurate. So going back to the issue of the kids, as much as people make all the mistakes I just said for themselves, they can definitely make it for their children, right? And it's easier to make those mistakes for your children because at least with you, you've got your kind of own internal feeling about what's right for you. You know, a lot of people are detached from it, but you might have a bit of gut instinct. You might have a bit of this, bit of that. It's easier to have accurate gut instinct for you than it is for anyone else, even if it's your children and you care so deeply about them. It's still, they've got their own lives, their own nervous system, their own perspectives. It's very hard to be as accurate for someone else as it is for yourself. So getting that objective data that's not biased and that's not generalized, right? That's not, you know, generalize in all the ways that I just talked about, can be hugely effective, hugely helpful for kids. And just as I said, we can't promise to prevent anything, but massively reduce risk. I feel confident to use the word massively, because if you really start when someone is, still a child, right, under 18, depending on the issue, but with a lot of issues, the chances of it developing will be so much less. If you can put those habits in place now, those healthy habits that they then do for a lifetime. Because as I said, when I see people who are following those recommendations and they've been doing it for decades, maybe sometimes even since childhood, they often, in fact, maybe even usually don't have the issue. Like, it absolutely does make a difference. So I 100% recommend it for kids, especially. I'd always say heal yourself first. Always work on yourself first. Always be the example that you want to see. But, maybe kids second.
Yeah, you're bringing them up right next to you. So with all that said, Elwin, how does somebody get started?
Great question. I'm sure that we'll have some links underneath this. So, I can say them out loud for someone on audio as well. If you go to geneticinsights.co, then you'll be brought straight to the Limitless page, I believe, where that's kind of like you have access to everything. If you want to select one of the collections that we talked about earlier, then if you go to feelyounger.net, that's where we have them available currently. You'll see Genetic Insights is at the top, one of the main menu items, and then you can see all the different collections that we talked about underneath those. The weight loss and pain reduction and nutrient needs and all the stuff I talked about earlier. So they're all listed there. There's so many of them that I don't think we can list them all underneath the video. What we'll also do to thank you for watching right the way to the end of the video is give you a discount code. I won't say how much it is because we might change it over time, so I don't want to mispromise anything to anyone, but have a look at the description underneath the video or underneath the audio. We'll definitely give you a good deal to get it as affordably as you possibly can. Remember, we can't give discounts on the DNA kit. We can only give it on the collections because we literally have a legal contractual agreement to always offer the DNA kit at the same price. However, you don't have to get the DNA kit from us, as I said in episode 1. If you can get it cheaper from someone else, or you want to get it from someone else to compare their results to ours, feel free. In terms of someone who really wants to go for it, I would actually encourage it. I feel confident enough to say, go and try the other reports. If you find any that are anywhere near as helpful or accurate as ours, I'd love to hear about it. Because maybe I'll do a deal with them and we'll combine them with ours. But I've not found anything yet that is anywhere near as accurate or helpful. So by all means, try some other companies and compare it to ours and see for yourself.
I think that's one of the things, as well with this podcast is the empowerment to the individual of keep looking, keep searching, be curious, keep delving deeper so that you can fully and completely optimize. Elwin, anything final thoughts before we come to a close on this episode?
Thank you, Chrissy. Those are really great questions, I think, in this episode and the previous ones, including, some challenging ones like what do you do if, this goes wrong or that goes wrong. But I think it's really important to ask that. I would say, thank you for watching up until this point. I realize at this point you may still not know if I'm right or if you can trust me or, if I'm telling you the truth. So all I can say is, the barrier to entry is extremely low as long as you already have your data from somewhere else. And we're going to give you a discount. I think our cheapest collections are like $45, something like that. Then you got the discount off it as well. So don't believe me or disbelieve me. Just try it. Keep an open mind. If you go in trying to disprove it, I'm sure you'll find some evidence to do so. Although you might still be blown away, as I found, but I don't know. I can't guarantee it because, the attitude that you take to something does affect it. But if you just go in open, not believing me, not disbelieving me, I think you'll be very pleasantly surprised by just how accurate and just how helpful it is. And then, my only other request is please tell us about it. Please tell us about your experiences. It's so difficult to get people to leave reviews, unfortunately, on the website for whatever reason. Maybe, I don't know, if other people bribe people and we don't do it or something. But if you do have a good experience, please share it with other people because it lets them know, that this is something that is worthwhile. If you feel in any way grateful or happy or pleased that it's as good as it is, please, I consider the debt more than repaid if you just tell other people about how great it's been for you, or just whatever, give your honest experience. If you don't like it, tell us that as well. I'd take any and all feedback. And any other questions that you have, put it in the comments underneath in YouTube. That's where we really look for comments. And if there's several of them, maybe we'll do a part 3.
Fantastic. Thank you. And thank you everyone for joining us today. We do appreciate you. So as well, always know we're going to keep bringing more and more episodes to help you, especially on your path to health, wellness, and optimization. So make sure you hit the subscribe button, and we will see you next time. I hope you enjoyed that episode. And if you did, I want to tell you about a way that you can support the podcast while also getting great deals on high quality supplements that Elwin and I personally use, and that's Feel Younger. What I love about Feel Younger is that they have great quality products with minimal fillers at a very affordable price. You can call their customer support team 20 hours a day, 7 days a week, and in my experience, they're very helpful and friendly. And the thing I love most of all is the amazing descriptions that Elwin has written about each product category on that topic. And each product has so much education on it that I've actually learned more from reading the descriptions than I have from a lot of articles. So to support the podcast, please use Feel Younger for all your supplement needs. And to let them know we sent you, use promo code RejuvenateMe for 20% off your first order at feelyounger.net. That's 20% off your first order using promo code RejuvenateMe at feelyounger.net.